Hey, and welcome to the episode 4 of our Spring Boot and Microservices tutorial series. Well, in the last video, we created some APIs wherein we have seen how to create get mappings, post mapping, delete mapping, or an patch mapping. And also we have tested those APIs using Postman. We made different types of requests using Postman and we have successfully done everything. Well, in this video, we'll understand the very important concept in Spring, which is dependency injection. And this is going to be one of the very important video of this entire tutorial series. If you understand the concept of dependency injection, it would be quite easy for you to understand the concept of Spring framework. Okay, so let's get started. Now, in this example, if you look at this, what is a dependency? For the first question is, what is a dependency? You know, as per the name says, dependency means something is dependent on something, isn't it? Now, if you look at our code right now, my product controller is dependent on the product service. So if the product service isn't there, I won't be able to make a call to this get all products which belong to the product service class. Now, let's go to the product service class, and if you look at this, everywhere we are making a call to the methods of the repository class. That means my service or the product service is dependent on product repository. If the product repository isn't there, if I don't create the object of product repository, obviously my code is not gonna run. So ultimately, if you look at this picture, everything, right? So the controller is dependent on service is dependent on repository, and repository might be dependent on something else. So this is what a dependency is. Now, what is dependency injection? We are not here to understand what is dependency. Rather, we should understand what is dependency injection and why do I need it? Well, dependency injection is a design pattern wherein an object doesn't create its own dependency. Rather, it depends on or it asks somebody else to provide the dependency. Let's try to understand more elaborately. In our case, if you look at the code, we created the dependency ourselves, right? The controller is dependent on the service and we created the object of the service by ourselves. That means the controller itself is responsible for creating the object of service. And the same case, the service here is responsible to create the object of the repository. So that is something that we want to replace or we want to change using the concept of dependency injection. What dependency injection says that, hey, don't create your dependency by yourself. So don't create, it will say the product service implementation, hey, don't create the dependency by yourself. I would provide you. Okay, who is that I? That I is Spring. The Spring is going to provide you the dependency. So Spring has a concept, we say IOC or inversion of control container. So what will happen? So let's try to understand what exactly Spring is going to do. Then we will actually do. Let's try to understand what will happen here. Spring has a concept. Let's move a little bit here. So Spring has a concept known as a container or IOC container. So the name of this is IOC or inversion of control. And all the dependencies would be kept inside this IOC container. And whenever a class needs the dependency, will ask Spring, hey Spring, provide me those dependency. And that the process of providing the dependency by Spring is known as the dependency injection. Okay, so let's try to understand how exactly it's gonna work. So what will happen for all the classes you can see over here, whether it is service, whether it is, the repository, or in future if you have something else. So for all those classes, the beans or the dependencies. Well, don't get confused when I say the word beans. Okay, bean is a fancy word which means object. So don't get confused by the word beans. Bean means object. Bean means object. That's what you need to remember. So this IOC container would have the objects of different classes. And whenever I need those objects, here see, when we are saying dependencies and all such things, behind the scene, at the end, everything is object only. It's in Java is an object-oriented programming, and all we need, service needs an object of repository, controller needs an object of service. So all we need is objects, right? So Spring will have those objects inside, and whenever I need those objects, I will ask Spring, hey, give me the object. Spring will provide those objects. Let's see how exactly it's gonna work. Okay, so I'm gonna add certain annotations right now. Let's go to our code, and first thing, First, let's go to the repository. Okay. I want Spring to create the bean or the dependency for me. How exactly Spring will create? For that, I need to annotate this with an annotation at a repository. Okay. So for the repository, I'm going to use this specific annotation called repository. Otherwise, I can use this annotation at component as well, which is the base annotation. And every other annotation that we will be using right now. We will have repository, service, and so on, right? They are nothing but some specialized type of component annotation only. So if you write repository, let's write repository itself here. And if you move your cursor over the repository, you will be able to see that it is nothing but component only, right? It is a combination of component, or it is also known as a stereotype annotation. So which is equivalent of a component annotation. Done. Next thing what I'm going to do, I would go to my product service and I want Spring to create the dependency. I would write here at service. Done. Remember, don't write this annotation service at component or at repository on top of interfaces. You should write it on top of classes because objects can be created for classes, not interfaces. Okay. So that is one point you need to remember. Done. So we have done this. Now, okay. So what will happen if I run this code right now? I didn't do the dependency injection as of now, remember. So if I run this code right now, what is going to happen? All the bins will get created. All the bins will get created. How do I know that the bins are getting created? Because there is one more annotation. So if you move your cursor here on this, the main application class, so there is an annotation at Spring Boot application. Let's move our cursor over here and you would be able to see that there is an annotation, spatial annotation called at component scan. You see, at component scan. This is a very, very, very important annotation. So what exactly it does? What is the role of this annotation? This annotation actually scans the package where it is being declared. It is declared inside the package called com.rds.productService. So it scans the package as well as all the sub packages. So all these packages, API, model, repository, service, they are sub package of this product service package, of this bigger package. So it scans all of them. It scans all of them, and from those, whenever it finds any class has an annotation like at service or at repository or even at REST controller or at controller, it creates bin for those. Okay. It creates the bin and it stores the bin inside our IOC container. So here right now, I would be having the bins for my product service. So there would be an object of product service. Similarly, there would be an object of product repository. Similarly, there would be object for the product controller. So all these bins or objects would be stored inside the IOC container. So this is how Spring will create the dependency for you. So now you don't need to create the dependency by yourself. Spring is going to create the dependency for you. Now next question is like, how can I use those dependencies? So Spring has created the dependencies. How can I make use of those dependencies? So in order to make use of those dependencies, Spring has provided you a concept called auto-wearing. So what is auto-wearing? Auto-wearing means automatic injection of the dependency. How does it work? How can I implement it? Let's have a look. So in this code, what I'm going to do, I would go to, first of all, I'll go to the service because service needs repository. So here I created this new product repository. Don't do that. Remove that. And rather, you can achieve this auto-wearing. There are multiple ways in which you can do the auto-wearing. So what is the preferred way? So one of the ways, like you can use this annotation at auto-weared and it will work. But Spring doesn't recommend that. And there are some reason behind it. If I try to explain those reasons right now, it would be a little bit complicated for you to understand. So right now I'm not explaining that, but it is something which is not recommended. It creates a very tight coupling. I don't want to go with very tight coupling here. I should have a loosely coupled system. And that's where I won't use this approach. Rather, what Spring says, use constructor injection. So how does constructor injection works? All that you need to do is to create a constructor. So you just need to create a constructor. And on top of the constructor, you need to write this AutoAdd, but this is optional. You don't need to write from Spring Boot 3 onwards. You don't need to write this AutoAdd annotation. You can remove that annotation and your code will still work. So Spring will do the injection automatically whenever it finds, okay, there is a product service implementation constructor I'm already having, which is expecting a product repository object, and automatically Spring will do the auto-wearing. Now you can see if you're using IntelliJ IDEA Ultimate, it's quite simple to see that the auto-wearing stuff that it is happening. It will show you the symbols and all such things. Cool. Now let's go to the other thing. So if I go to the controller, so in this API, here also you will be able to see that I created the dependency by myself. Of course, I'm not going to do that. I would just keep it till this point, and then I would create a constructor once again. Again, writing this AutoAdd annotation isn't very much optional. You don't need to write. If you write, that's not a problem, but you don't need to write. So that's how this dependency injection is going to happen. So let's run this code once again and let's see if it's working or not. Let's run this. Yeah, that's fine. The application started, and let's cross check. I would go to this. First of all, let's try to insert one by making a post request. Whatever we have stored during the last episode won't be there because we have restarted the application. We are not saving the data in a persistent storage or in a database. So definitely those won't be there. So let's try to save a new data. So I tried to save and you see the data got saved. We are getting the correct response. Yes, the code is working. So that is the concept of dependency injection. Once again, how does it work? So the idea is very simple. Whatever annotation that you have, right? So you have a REST controller annotation. So behind the scene, REST controller is a component annotation. Let me prove my point. So REST controller is, if you move your cursor, you would be able to see it is a combination of controller annotation. So if you go to the controller annotation, it is what you see at the end, you would find this add component annotation. So this annotation is responsible for creating the beans. So your beans are getting created because of this annotation. Similarly, when we move to your service and when we have added this add service annotation, so behind the scene, once again, if you move your cursor, you would be able to see that that's nothing but your component annotation. And similarly, if you go to your repository, if you open the repository, if you move your cursor again over here, you would be able to see that again we got this component annotation. So this is one of the annotation which is responsible for all these things that is happening. And second annotation which is responsible is here is if you move your cursor in Spring Boot application, you would be able to see that that's very important annotation at component scan. So component scan scans all the packages, and wherever it finds any class which is annotated with at component annotation, at service, at repository, at controller, at REST controller, or anything like that, it automatically creates all the dependencies and store it inside the Spring IOC container. So this is the IOC container, which is also known as, you can also say it is application context. So that's where Spring stores all the dependency. Those dependencies only we use a fancy term called bean, and those are being stored in this container. And later on, whenever we need those dependencies, all we need to do is auto-wearing. How does auto-wearing happen? You don't need to do any specific work for that. Just need to create constructor. That's all. No annotation. Nothing is required from Spring Boot 3 onwards. All that you need to do is to have proper constructor. So that's where we have created a constructor. Similarly, we have created constructor in our controller as well. This is the constructor that we have created, and that's all. That's how the code will work. So in this video, we just understand how dependency injection happens. But there is still a question, why do we need to do the dependency injection? We can easily create, like last time we created, right? So we can easily create the new product service implementation and so on, right? So we can create the dependency manually as well. What is the need for this dependency injection? Well, I can explain this by adding a lot of example, lot of things, like by saying, okay, car needs an engine and car needs a tire, blah blah blah, right? So I don't want to give some random logic, random examples. Rather, I want you to understand yourself the thing as we write the code. So as of now, we are not understanding the need for dependency injection because our code is very simple. In our next episode, definitely we are going to add the database concept here, and that's where you would find why dependency injection was important and what is the problem it is solving. Yes, you need to keep a little patience because understanding this concept, yes, it takes some time, and I would surely make you understand everything that we are doing, why we are doing, how to do, what to do, and everything. Don't worry about it. Yes, so that's all about this episode, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for watching.